Yeah, man, 5170 to the world. Rap solo till I die, man. Blaq Steaze, your boy J. Urus on the beat. It's also a religion, that's what we say. Yeah. Been pushing in spy all day, my boy. I say we cornerstone inspired.
Not only does this present system have to be upturned, totally disrupted, stopped in its tracks, and imagined anew, also our vision has to be renewed, but because that's one of the difficulties that we have. We are plagued with politics without principle, policies without the intent to ever realize them, and leadership without vision. That's our difficulty.
This is Burning the Mic with Steaze on the ACWS network, where we delve into intricate and socially fabric-enhancing content. I'd like you to like, comment, subscribe, tap the notification bell there in the corner so you can get every video that we drop as soon as it does. Before we go into what I feel will be a touchy one, I'd like to say that the ballot is broken. Why does voting feel like a scam in South Africa? We were told that the ballot was the bullet of the free, but how do you reload a system that only jams for the poor? This episode is not about telling you who to vote for, but we are here to debunk the value and the essence of your vote, specifically you. The year is 2025 and the South African electorate is tired, not just of inflation and load shedding, but of democracy itself. We are in an area where it feels like voting is getting a receipt for your own betrayal. Before we understand where the betrayal comes from, we need to understand the history of voting in South Africa. South Africa's voting history has not just been about rights, it's also been mostly about exclusion, by violence, by law, and by design. For over 300 years, the right to vote was a gatekeeping tool to maintain white minority rule in South Africa. Black South Africans were systematically excluded through the laws like the 1930 Natives Land Act and the 1936 Representation of Natives Act. Colored and Indian communities were briefly included in limited forms in the Cape, only later to be stripped again by the apartheid government. Women of all races were not allowed to vote, and these were only gained in fragments, with black women standing last in line, regaining or gaining their status to vote in 1994. How many have died for this right to vote? I believe there's too many to mention in a single episode. Their names are endless, and some never even made it to the newspapers. However, they came far and wide. From Sharpeville, Soweto, Bisho, Alexandria, Kenton-on-Sea, Kwalanga, Enyanga, Mitchell's Plain. Many laid their lives down for this right. They let go of their freedom. They were prepared to die to ensure that you and I today would have a determining say in our future and how our country is run. So when somebody says our people died for this right, they are not exaggerating. But here is the truth. We inherited the voting rights, not the voting right and its power.
Just before the 1994 election, when almost everyone else in the country was preparing for a united democratic South Africa, the white right wing was calling for a whites-only Volksstaat. While the rest of the country was talking peace, the right wing was threatening war. They tried to destabilize the country through a series of terrorist attacks, and many of them ended up behind bars. Today, the Afrikaner Weerstandsbeweging and other right-wing organizations, such as the Bond van Boere Krijgsgevangenes, are pleading for amnesty for these right-wing prisoners. They claim that, like the ANC, they too were engaged in a political struggle for freedom.
Yeah. We never stopped being involved in every step of the talks until the interim constitution was produced. For 4 years we were negotiating. Day and night. We would go into nights. We'd be so tired. You know this tablet called Rachmaker? Yeah. We would drink the Rachmaker to stay sober.
Wow.
First, it was talks about talks. Then Grote Minute with the first one. We had to write the agenda, agree on who must be around the table. They didn't want Slow to come back from exile and Chris to be around the table. We said, you're crazy. You want to determine our delegation. If you want to determine our delegation, let's call it off. We'll fly back. I'll tell you about another incident. Then they shot people at the Sebokeng before Goldstone Commission was appointed. Me and Maduna flew back and in anger. So these guys are not serious. It was before the skill.
Wow.
But Lusaka said, go back. So we came back,
Yeah.
prepare. So we have Groteskir. Then there was DF Malan talks, all interim talks, Pretoria Minute, where we suspended armed struggle.
Democracy came in 1994, and the politicians in power, namely the ANC and the NP, with their sunset clauses, promised change. But for most Black South Africans, it delivered symbolic inclusion and economic exclusion. After every election, service delivery delays continued to mount, corruption scandals continued to surface, and ministers were reshuffled, but there was no real paradigm shift. It is said in South Africa the ballot buys loyalty during campaigns, but it also sells silence after results. Once in office, the political powers subsidized the voters' demands, offering symbolic gestures instead of systematic reform. And now we are faced with a situation where South Africa remains shackled by a close to 70% youth unemployment. 350 grants now are being stretched across entire households, and this systematically teaches our people to depend on the system. Schools are without infrastructure and toilets, and they are continuing rolling blackouts in a country where load shedding turns 18. If democracy was a meal, we've been served steam, not the food. The gurus of the game say numbers don't lie, so let's talk statistics when it comes to voter outcome. In 1994, the voter turnout was 86. This shows signs of a nation that knew the value, the essence, and what had been laid down in terms of groundwork for them to be able to vote. However, this is not apathy. This is resignation. The people aren't tired. They are disillusioned, and the parties aren't helping.
We are not teetering towards a failing state. We are already a failed state. And when
That's a
the
strong way to put it.
Yes, when the wound and the pain is inflicted by our own on our own, it is much deeper and much more painful. It is 31 years into democracy, and yet poverty has a complexion and a gender. And that gender is feminine, and that complexion is black. It's 31 into democracy, and yet we are the only country in Africa that ever became free from colonialism. After 30 years, have voluntarily handed over power to our colonizers, oppressors, and racists. We are the only country ever to be free from colonialism.
Explain that. How have we handed over that power?
You know, it's called a constitutional democracy because the constitution is very clear about how you conduct elections and subsequently how you constitute government. The Electorate on the 29th of May were very clear and categoric who they voted for. 64% of those, it's the ANC, divided amongst three, 40% ANC, 15% MK, and just less than 10% EFF. And who do we, of all the choices that we could possibly make, we look the other way and say, no, we'd rather go into bed with the DA, which itself is a merger between two white parties in 2000 against the Swart Gevaar of Thabo Mbeki to go on to become the biggest opposition in this country. And yet when black people want to come together and say we need to continue to achieve just the two things, improving the quality of lives of the majority of our people on the one hand, and a better life for all on the other, not just for elected officials, we are told that that's a doomsday coalition. A doomsday coalition for who?
The ANC is riddled with factional battles. The CR17 presidential run is evidence of this, and it also holds a deep and staggering historical debt to the South African people in terms of broken promises, campaigns that have continued on their backs, and t-shirts that have been left as signs of empty promises. The DA now feels like apartheid all over again, only this time with a better PR team. The EFF chants revolution, but wears expensive Italian and imported brands at their court hearings. New players like Rise Mzansi and Build One South Africa speak a great game, but when it comes to walking the walk, they remain metro-bound and donator-captured. So whoever fuels in the money controls their decisions. And that is one of the divide and conquer strategies that continues to work today. Do not be somebody that is palpable to financial gain. You will be bought. Now a question arises again, who speaks for the working class? And it looks like nobody really does.
I wake up in the morning with a feeling of desperate anger, and I go to bed at night with a feeling of desperate hopelessness. When a young man, I spoke in Uppington, and they were bringing them from across the region, and he listened to me, and I came to the end of my address, and like a preacher, I was waxing, and I was getting excited, talking about how they must not give up their dreams and their hopes, and how there must ever be room for themselves and for what they want to invest in themselves. And he was looking at me and looking at me and looking at me, and at the end he said to me, "Can I ask a question?" I said, "Yes." He said to me, "Dr. Boesak, what for?" 18 years old, and he sees nothing, and all he can say is, "What for?" That is the crisis.
Not being listened to, they are resorting to what they think, is going to get the attention of the powers that be, embarking on the acts that they are embarking on. And so that is my sense. And as it is in this country, one needs to recall that historically, when people felt that their grievances were not being attended to or addressed, they always resorted to violence, as long as they listened to speeches being delivered. It reminds one of what Amilcar Cabral said. He said that, during the liberation struggle, people are not fighting for concepts. They are not fighting, for concepts of freedom, this and that. People want to see real changes in their lives. So unless and until people begin to see that taking place, people will continue expressing themselves in whatever manner they deem necessary.
Even the Independent Electoral Commission, the supposed referee, is not without controversy. In 2016, the Constitutional Court flagged the IEC for failing to verify voter addresses. In 2021, the complaint came through of ballot tampering and missing ballots in metros like Nelson Mandela Bay and Ekurhuleni. The commission also faced scrutiny for rushing coalition announcements and voter roll inconsistencies. IEC's underfunding and lack of digital transparencies means that the electoral process itself is seen by many as rigged, at least disorganized, and also dishonest. It is sad to also mention that whenever South African politics are the topic, the truth actually disappears and suspicion thrives. In theory, opposition parties are supposed to check power, but in South Africa, they often mirror it. The DA governs the Western Cape like a gated community. The EFF campaigns like rebels but performs like insiders. The IFP and the PA weaponize ethnicity and fear to consolidate vote banks. Instead of proposing a united front, parties have continued to fragment and looked to consolidate identity amongst racial lines. And the result? Voters retreat from the system or vote against parties rather than for solutions. Opposition leaders often prioritize parliamentary seats, TV time, and Twitter clout over grassroots accountability. I believe we also need to confront the role of education in civic participation. Less than 30% of South Africans fully understand how laws are passed, and fewer than that can name their ward councillor. And political literacy in South Africa has been limited to party slogans and t-shirts for way too long. This has led to a culture of blind loyalty to parties like the ANC, emotional voting, and mistrust in governance, but no tools to change it. As long as politics is seen as a big man's game, the ordinary citizen will always remain a spectator in their own country.
That our politicians are completely unaccountable to us. And when I went to Parliament, I remember Nelson Mandela saying to us, the moment you think you are more important than the people who sent you here, the people you represent, the people who pay your salary, is the moment you're of no value to those people. And I happen to believe that.
Yeah.
And that's why I resigned in protest when Thabo Mbeki refused to allow an unfettered investigation into corruption in the arms trade.
South Africa's black vote, once consolidated behind liberation, is now fragmented across racial lines, provinces, and class interests. Some say this is democracy at work. Some argue that it dilutes power, especially when parties refuse to form united fronts or policy-based coalitions. Coalitions have caused chaos in metros like Johannesburg and Tshwane. These have gone on to show us how fractured black representation often leads to governance and paralysis in it. Therefore, the black vote is just being monetized, scattered, mined, manipulated. The ballot was never meant to be a silver bullet, but at least it was supposed to be a foot in the door. The question now remains to us today: what happens even if that door is locked, cracked, or is it just an illusion? Voting alone will not save South Africa, but not voting offers a simple surrender to those who are our opposition. So today I ask, what does meaningful participation look like? Can our communities create accountability outside of the spectrum of politics? Can democracy survive without economic justice? Please drop your answers in the comment and let me know what you think. I'd like to hear that. They said vote for freedom, but we have voted for waiting rooms. They said your voice matters, but we have been left with the echoes of their empty promises. For those deciding if the ballot is still worth it, we are not here to tell you how to vote. I am here actually to tell you what has been done for you to be able to vote. This has been Blaq Steaze for Ambidextrous Chats with Steaze on Burning the Mic. Until next time, please stay woke, stay alert, and stay educated. Aluta continuo.
In most countries where we have some form of liberal democracy, we live in the best democracies money can buy, because our democracies are bought and paid for. And they're bought by corporate interests, by foreign lobby groups. So in the UK, that would be particularly the Saudi lobby and the Israel lobby. And they have very little to do with ordinary people anymore.